Let's do some more practice with writing hypothesis pairs, writing the claim, writing the opposite of the claim, and then deciding whether to reject the null hypothesis or fail to reject. In this question, it says that the mean IQ of statistics students is at least 110. The big p-value is 0.084, and the level of significance is 0.1. We'll begin with the first step, writing the claim. In the first couple words of the sentence, we see the word mean. This means the symbol we'll use is mu. Now, it also says later on that the mean IQ is at least 110. At least stands for greater or equal. That will be this symbol in the middle of the null hypothesis section, greater or equal. We're also given the number 110. And since the greater than or equal falls inside of the null hypothesis section, that will be our null hypothesis. So begin with writing mu, greater than or equal, 110, label it as the null hypothesis, and also write that this is the claim. That takes care of our first step. Now for the alternate hypothesis, H1. We have to think about the opposite of greater or equal. The opposite of greater is less. And since we've already used equals in the null, we can't use it in the alternate. In fact, the alternate will never contain equals. But we will still say mu and still say 110. Now for the third step, we compare big P against alpha. Our big P value is given later on at 0.084. The level of significance is 0.1. And this means that our big P is less than alpha. This means we go to the first option here. If big P is less than alpha, that means we have strong enough evidence to reject the null and cross it out. So let's cross out the null hypothesis and box in the alternate because that's the only one left. So, in rejecting the null, we've also rejected the claim. If big P had been greater than alpha, that means we would not have had strong enough evidence to cross out the null hypothesis, and we would have had to keep it. If big P is greater than alpha, we could not have crossed out the claim. In other words, we can say that we have insufficient evidence to reject the claim. However, since our big P in this problem was less than alpha, we do have strong enough evidence to reject the claim. Let's restate our claim. The claim was that the mean IQ of statistics students is at least 110. And let's also mention the level of significance. So we've said what we needed to say here. We've talked about the evidence. We've talked about whether we're rejecting or failing to reject. We have repeated the claim, and we've placed the level of significance. So we have what we need here. Let's do some more practice about writing hypothesis pairs and deciding whether to reject the null hypothesis or failing to reject it. This question says the mean annual income of workers who have studied statistics is greater than $45,750. The big P value is 0.152 and the level of significance is 0.05. Let's begin writing the claim for step 1. We're told that this will be a mean, and we will use mu as our symbol for that reason. Now, the inequality symbol that we see here is greater than. That will be underneath the alternate hypothesis section. And the number that we use is 45,750. So we'll begin by saying mu greater than 45,750. This is the alternate hypothesis because we don't have equals, and it is also the claim. Step 2, the null hypothesis. It must be the opposite of the alternate hypothesis. The alternate says greater, so the null must say less, and null must also contain equals because all of our symbols in the null section contain equals. We'll still say mu, and we will still say 45,750. Now we have our hypothesis pair, and now we compare big P against alpha. If our big P is less than or equal to alpha, that means we can reject the null hypothesis. If our big P is greater than alpha, it means we fail to reject it because our evidence isn't strong enough to allow us to reject it. Now our big P was 0.152 and our alpha was 0.05. We can see that our big P is greater than alpha. Therefore, we go to the second option. That means we don't have strong enough evidence to cross out the null. This means we have no choice but to keep the null. So we'll draw a green box around that. It means we cannot support the alternate hypothesis. Now notice the alternate hypothesis is also the claim. So what we write here is we do not support the alternate hypothesis. Now if big P was less than alpha, that means we would have crossed out the null, and that would have left the claim behind. So if big P was less than or equal to alpha, we would say that we would support the claim. However, in our case, we don't have that strong evidence, and so we don't support the claim. Now, let's restate that. We would say there is not enough evidence to support the claim. The claim was that the mean annual income of workers who've studied statistics is greater than 45,750. Let's also mention we have failed to reject the null hypothesis and mention the significance level. So we've spoken about the evidence. We said it's not strong enough. We've mentioned the claim again. We've mentioned that we have failed to reject the null hypothesis, and we have mentioned the significance level. So we've said what we need to say here.